The fluorescent lights hummed like a death sentence above him. Kong Min-jae's eyes opened slowly, his tattooed fingers curling around the sterile white sheets as consciousness clawed its way back through the morphine haze. The pain in his chest was nothing compared to the ice that flooded his veins when he heard her voice. "Vitals are stabilizing. Keep the 4 drip at." He turned his head. And there she stood. Dr. Amara Sionwosu. White coat. Stethoscope. 7 years older. 7 years gone. The Nigerian woman he had loved until loving her became synonymous with bleeding. Her eyes met his. Neither of them breathed. The machines monitoring his heart betrayed him, the steady beep accelerating into something desperate, something furious, something that sounded exactly like the night she left him dying on a warehouse floor. "You," he whispered, his voice a fractured thing wrapped in silk and venom. Her clipboard trembled in her hands. She was supposed to be dead to him. A ghost. A wound he had cauterized with whiskey and violence and 7 years of building an empire on the grave of his own heart. But here she was. Flesh and blood. Close enough to touch. Close enough to destroy. And something in the way her fingers whitened around that clipboard told him everything he thought he knew was wrong. Please like, share, and subscribe. The private wing of Seoul National University Hospital existed in a different universe from the chaos below. Here, the floors gleamed like black mirrors. The walls absorbed sound like secrets. And the patients who occupied these rooms paid enough to ensure that their names never appeared on any official record. Room 1701 was the crown jewel of discretion. 3 armed guards stood outside the door, their suits too expensive for hospital security, their eyes too cold for civilian work. Inside, monitoring equipment worth more than most apartments beeped in quiet rhythm. And on the bed lay the man-soul's underworld called the Black Crane. Kong Min-jae. His eyes remained fixed on the ceiling, but his mind was 7 years and 3,000 miles away. Dr. Amara Sionwosu stood in the supply closet, her back pressed against shelves of gauze and surgical tape, her hand clamped over her mouth to muffle the sounds escaping her throat. She couldn't breathe. She couldn't think. How was he here? How was he alive? The last time she had seen him, he was bleeding out on concrete while she screamed his name through a fog of whatever they had drugged her with. Dr. Sionwosu? The knock on the supply closet door made her flinch so violently she knocked over a box of syringes. "One moment." Her voice came out steady. Professional. A lie wrapped in 7 years of practice. She pressed her palms against her thighs, smoothing the invisible wrinkles from her white coat. Then she opened the door. Park Do-yoon stood there, concern etched into his handsome features. "The VIP patient is asking for you," he said carefully. Well, asking might be generous. He's refusing treatment from anyone else. Amara's heart stopped. He's conscious. Very. Do-yoon's jaw tightened. And he seems to know you. The walk back to room 1701 felt like a death march. Each step echoed against the polished floors. Each breath felt stolen from someone else's lungs. Amara kept her gaze forward, her shoulders straight, her expression professionally neutral. Inside, she was 17 again. Standing in the rain outside her father's shipping office in Lagos. Watching Min-jae step out of a black car with eyes that cut through her soul. "You're the translator's daughter?" "I'm Amara." Amara. The way he'd said her name, like he was tasting something rare. Something he intended to keep. "I'm going to remember that." She stopped outside room 1701. The guards didn't acknowledge her existence. They simply stepped aside, their movements synchronized, their faces blank. The door opened. And there he was. 7 years had turned Kong Min-jae from dangerous into devastating. The softness of his 20s was gone. In its place was a man carved from shadow and silence. His jawline could cut glass. His cheekbones belonged on currency. And his eyes, those cold, piercing eyes that had once looked at her like she was the only light in his darkness, now held nothing but winter. He was propped against the pillows, his hospital gown doing nothing to diminish his presence. The tattoos that crawled up his neck, across his collarbones, down his forearms, they were more elaborate now. More brutal. A crane in flight wrapped around his throat. Names in Korean and English disappeared beneath the fabric at his wrists. When Amara entered, he didn't move. He didn't speak. He simply looked at her. And that look was worse than any words could have been. "Mr. Park." Amara addressed the alias on his chart without meeting his eyes. "Your surgery was successful. The bullet was removed from." Amara. Her name in his mouth was a violence unto itself. She stopped speaking. Her fingers tightened around the chart until her knuckles ached. "Look at me." It wasn't a request. Slowly, agonizingly, she raised her eyes to meet his. The machines betrayed him again. His heart rate spiked. His blood pressure climbed. But his face remained perfectly, terrifyingly still. "You're alive," he said softly. "Yes." "You're a doctor." "Yes." "And you've been in Seoul this whole time." Amara's throat constricted. "Not the whole time." Something flickered in his eyes. Something that might have been rage. Or grief. Or the place where the two became indistinguishable. "Leave us," he said. He wasn't speaking to her. The guard in the corner, she hadn't even noticed him, slipped out silently. The door clicked shut. And suddenly, the room felt like a cage. Min-jae watched her the way a predator watches prey that has foolishly wandered back into its territory. She looked different. The bright-eyed girl who used to laugh at his terrible attempts at Yoruba was gone. In her place stood a woman wrapped in armor made of professionalism and distance. Her hair was pulled back in a low bun. Her white coat was pristine. Her hands, those hands that used to trace patterns on his chest while she told him stories about her grandmother's village, were steady as they held his chart. But her eyes. Those soft, expressive eyes that had haunted every dream he'd tried to drown in alcohol and blood, they were terrified. Good, he thought. She should be afraid. "I have other patients," Amara said, and she hated how thin her voice sounded. "No." Min-jae shifted slightly, and the wince of pain that crossed his features was the first human thing she'd seen from him. "You don't. Not right now. You're not in a position to." "I'm in exactly the position to do whatever I want." His voice dropped to something intimate. "Dangerous. I've spent 7 years building that position. On the ashes of what you left behind." Amara's composure cracked. "I didn't leave anything behind." The words escaped before she could stop them. "I was taken." Silence. Min-jae's expression didn't change, but something in the air shifted. A tension that had been coiled tight suddenly wound tighter. "Taken," he repeated. Amara stopped herself. Remembered where she was. Who she was talking to. What the last 7 years had taught her about the price of truth. "I need to check your incision site," she said instead. "The bullet fragmented. There may be complications." She moved toward the bed before he could respond. Her fingers on his skin were electric. Min-jae held himself perfectly still as Amara peeled back the edge of his bandages. Her touch was clinical. Professional. But her hands trembled almost imperceptibly. He catalogued every detail. The way she avoided his eyes. The way her breathing shortened when her fingers brushed his chest. The small scar on her wrist that hadn't been there 7 years ago. "This is healing well," she said quietly. "The surgeon did excellent work." "That was you." A beat. "Yes. You saved my life." Another beat. "Longer this time." "I took an oath." Min-jae's hand shot out, faster than a wounded man should have been able to move. His tattooed fingers wrapped around her wrist, holding her in place. Her eyes finally met his. "An oath," he repeated slowly. "Is that what kept you away? An oath to someone else?" The accusation hit Amara like a physical blow. "Let go of me." "Answer the question." "You don't get to ask me questions." Her voice shook with something between fury and grief. "You don't get to touch me. You don't get to look at me like I owe you anything. You owe me 7 years. His grip tightened. "Not enough to hurt. Just enough to ensure she couldn't run. You owe me an explanation. You owe me a reason why I woke up in my own blood with your name still on my lips and found nothing but your ghost." Amara's eyes burned. "You want reasons?" She leaned closer, close enough to see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes. "You want explanations? Look in a mirror, Min-jae. Look at what you've become. Then tell me I was wrong to disappear." She yanked her wrist free. He let her go. But the look in his eyes, that terrible wounded furious look, followed her all the way to the door. Outside room 1701, Amara made it exactly 12 steps before her legs gave out. Park Do-yoon caught her. "Whoa, hey. Amara." His arms were warm and steady around her shoulders. "What happened? Did he hurt you?" She shook her head. Couldn't speak. Could barely breathe. "Come on." Do-yoon guided her toward the staff lounge. "You're white as a sheet." "Well, as white as you get." Which is not at all, but you know what I mean. His terrible joke startled a laugh out of her. Or maybe it was a sob. She couldn't tell the difference anymore. The staff lounge was empty this late at night. Do-yoon deposited her on the worn couch and disappeared, returning moments later with a cup of tea that smelled like ginger and honey.
Drink, he ordered. Then talk. Or don't talk.
But definitely drink. Amara wrapped her fingers around the warm ceramic and said nothing. Do-yoon sat beside her, close enough to be supportive, far enough to give her space. He'd always been good at that. Good at reading her. Good at being exactly what she needed. It was why she almost loved him.
Almost.
He knows you, Do-yoon said finally.
Not a question. Yes. From before. Yes. Before?
Lagos before.
Amara closed her eyes. Busan before. Seoul before. Before I was a doctor. Before I was anyone. Silence.
Then, is he the reason you never talk about your life before med school?
The tea trembled in her hands.
He's the reason I almost didn't have a life after. The next morning arrived too soon. Amara had spent the night in the on-call room, staring at the ceiling, watching shadows move like memories across the textured tiles.
Sleep hadn't come. Peace certainly hadn't. At 6 a.m., her pager buzzed.
Room 1701. Patient refusing morning medication.
She closed her eyes. Of course he was.
When she entered his room, Min-jae was sitting up in bed, a tray of untouched food on the table beside him. The morning light through the window caught the edges of his tattoos, turning them into living art. He looked better than yesterday. Stronger. The color had returned to his face. His eyes were sharp and clear. And fixed entirely on her. Good morning, doctor. His voice was silk over steel. I hope you slept well.
I didn't.
Neither did I.
A pause.
I kept thinking about all the ways you might try to avoid me today. Amara ignored the bait. She moved to the forestand, checking the drip rate with mechanical efficiency. You need to take your antibiotics, she said. Post-operative infection is.
Sit down.
I'm not your subordinate, Mr. Park.
No.
Something flickered in his eyes. You're something far more complicated. Against every instinct screaming at her to run, Amara sat. Not on the bed. In the visitor's chair, as far from him as the room allowed while still technically being in it. She folded her hands in her lap and waited. Min-jae studied her with unnerving intensity. You look tired, he said finally. You shot me in the heart 7 years ago. I've been tired since. The words were out before she could stop them. Raw. Unfiltered. The kind of truth she'd trained herself never to speak. Min-jae's expression didn't change, but his hands, those tattooed hands that had once held her face while he promised her forever, curled into fists against the sheets. I shot you in the heart? His voice dropped dangerously low. I was the one left bleeding on a warehouse floor. I was the one who woke up in a hospital 3 weeks later to find you had vanished. No trace. No word. Nothing but your clothes still in my closet and your scent still on my pillows. Amara's chest constricted. You think I left you? It wasn't a question. I know you left me. You know nothing. The machines beeped a warning. Min-jae's blood pressure was climbing. Amara stood, moving to the monitor, her physician's training overriding her personal devastation. She adjusted settings, checked readings, did everything she could to focus on the numbers instead of the man. You need to calm down, she said. Your body is still recovering from major trauma. My body recovered from major trauma 7 years ago. His voice was close, too close. She turned to find him pushing himself up, swinging his legs over the edge of the bed despite the 4 lines and monitoring cables. The trauma you left behind took considerably longer. Min-jae. Do you know what I did after you disappeared? Amara stepped back. He stood. She should call for security. Should activate her emergency page. Should do anything except stand there, frozen, as the man she'd never stopped loving stalked toward her like the predator he'd become. I burned the world looking for you, he continued, each word a knife. I called in every favor. Spent every resource. Threatened, bribed, and killed to find out where you had gone and who had taken you from me. He was close now. Close enough that she could see the fine lines at the corners of his eyes. The evidence of years that hadn't been kind. And do you know what I found, Amara? She couldn't speak. Nothing. His voice cracked on the word. I found nothing. As if you had never existed. As if everything between us had been a hallucination I was too desperate to let go of. A tear slipped down Amara's cheek. She didn't wipe it away. Couldn't move. Could barely breathe. They made me disappear, she whispered. They drugged me and dragged me out of that warehouse and told me if I ever tried to contact you again, they would kill my brother. They would kill my mother. They would kill everyone I had ever loved, and they would make you watch before they finally let you die. Min Jae went absolutely still.
Who?
The word was barely audible. But the violence in it, the cold, calculated promise of complete destruction, filled the room like smoke.
I can't. Who, Amara?
I can't tell you. Her voice broke completely now. I couldn't tell you then, and I can't tell you now. Because they're still out there. They're still watching. And if they know I've seen you again, if they know we've spoken.
The door opened.
Park Do-yoon stepped in, his expression shifting from professional to protective in the space of a heartbeat. Dr. Seon-Wosu.
His voice was tight.
You're needed in the ER. Multi-vehicle collision.
All hands. Amara didn't move.
Couldn't tear her eyes away from Min Jae's face. From the war being waged behind those cold, beautiful eyes. Go, Min Jae said quietly. Save your patients. It sounded like a dismissal. It felt like a promise.
The ER was chaos.
Amara threw herself into it with desperate relief. This, at least, she understood. Blood and bone and the mechanics of keeping hearts beating, these were problems with solutions.
Unlike the man upstairs.
Unlike her own fractured past. She worked for 6 hours straight. 3 surgeries. 2 emergency resuscitations. 1 case she lost despite everything, a young woman whose internal bleeding had been too severe, whose family would be waiting in the corridor with hope in their eyes that Amara would have to shatter. When it was finally over, she stood in the scrub room, water running over her hands, and stared at her reflection in the mirror.
She looked like a ghost.
A ghost who had made the fatal mistake of haunting her own grave. You okay? Do-yoon appeared in the doorway, still in his scrubs, exhaustion carved into his features.
No.
Amara didn't bother lying. But I will be.
Liar.
He moved to the sink beside her, began washing his own hands. Want to talk about it?
No. Okay. A pause.
Want me to have him transferred? Amara's hands stilled under the water. Can you?
I can try.
He's technically stable enough to be moved to another facility. I can cite conflict of interest, prior personal relationship with the physician. Hospital would probably be relieved. That guy's security team makes everyone nervous.
Amara thought about it.
Thought about what it would mean to have Min Jae removed from her hospital, from her operating room, from her daily rounds. To go back to pretending he was a ghost instead of a man who was very much alive and very much still capable of destroying her.
No, she said finally. No.
If I transfer him, he'll think I'm running. She turned off the water, reached for a paper towel.
And he'll be right.
I've spent 7 years running. I'm tired. Do-yoon studied her with an expression she couldn't quite read.
Who is he, Amara? Really?
She told him the truth.
Not all of it.
Not the parts that would put him in danger.
But enough.
She told him about meeting Min Jae in Seoul when she was 23, fresh off a fellowship rotation at Busan University Hospital. How he'd come into the ER with a knife wound he refused to explain, and how she'd stitched him up while he watched her with eyes that saw too much. She told him about the months that followed. How he'd appeared everywhere, at the coffee shop near her apartment, at the little bookstore that sold Yoruba novels, at the night market where she went to feel less homesick. Always watching. Never pushing. Until the night she finally said yes to dinner. She told him about falling in love with a man who was clearly dangerous but treated her like something precious. Who learned her mother's favorite songs. Who traced the traditional scarification marks on her wrists, the marks of her father's family, like they were sacred text. She told him about the night it all ended. The warehouse. The meeting that was supposed to be routine. The look on Min Jae's face when the shooting started and she tried to run to him, only to feel a needle pierce her neck. She told him about waking up in a shipping container. About the man who stood over her, speaking in measured Korean that promised death if she didn't disappear. He loves you enough to die for you. Which means you have exactly enough power to destroy him. Leave. Now. Forever. Or I will show you exactly what forever looks like for everyone you care about. When she finished, Do-yoon was silent for a long moment. Then, and you never thought to go to the police? They were the police. Amara's voice was bitter. Or they owned them. Or they were bigger than them. I never found out which. I just knew that every time I tried to leave a trail, someone would appear to remind me what happens to people who don't stay disappeared. For 7 years? For 7 years. Do-yoon exhaled slowly.
And now he's here. In your hospital.
Thinking you're the one who betrayed him. Amara stared at her own hands. Hands that had saved Min Jae's life less than 24 hours ago. He thinks I left him to die. He thinks I traded him for something. Money, maybe, or protection, or another man. He spent 7 years hating me because he couldn't stop loving me, and I've spent 7 years.
Her voice broke.
You still love him, Do-yoon said quietly.
Not accusing.
Just observing.
Amara didn't answer. She didn't need to.
The private room was a cage. Min Jae had been caged before, interrogation rooms, detention cells, the particular prison of his own father's expectations.
But this was different.
This cage had Amara walking in and out of it, close enough to touch, far enough that the distance felt like a physical wound. After she left for the ER, he'd made calls. His second-in-command, Secretary Yoon, had arrived within the hour with a tablet, 3 burner phones, and the carefully neutral expression of a man who knew better than to ask questions. Find everything, Min Jae had ordered. Every move Dr. Amara Seon-wosu has made since the night she disappeared. Every address, every employer, every connection. Where she went, who she saw, what identity she used. Secretary Yoon had bowed and left. Now, 12 hours later, Min Jae stared at the preliminary report and felt his understanding of the past 7 years crack and reform like ice in spring. She hadn't left willingly. The evidence was subtle but undeniable. Immigration records showed her name flagged at every airport in Asia for 2 years after her disappearance, flagged and blocked, preventing her from traveling freely. Medical license applications in 3 different countries had been mysteriously denied or delayed. Employment records showed her working under variations of her name, never in the same city for more than 18 months. Someone had been managing her, controlling her movements, ensuring she stayed exactly where they wanted her, and that someone had resources that rivaled Min Jae's own. He was still processing the implications when the door opened. Amara entered with her evening rounds. Behind her, just visible through the closing door, stood Park Do-yoon, watching with an expression that made Min Jae's fingers itch for a weapon he no longer carried. Your vitals look good, Amara said, not meeting his eyes. Another day or 2 and you can be discharged.
Who is he? She paused, chart in hand. Who?
The man hovering outside my door like a guard dog. Min Jae kept his voice carefully neutral.
Dr. Park Do-yoon.
What is he to you? Something flickered across Amara's face. Something that might have been amusement if there had been any joy left between them.
He's my colleague.
He looks at you like more than a colleague. That's not your concern. Everything about you is my concern. Min Jae sat up straighter, ignoring the pull of healing tissue across his chest. It always has been. Amara finally met his eyes. You don't get to do that, she said quietly. You don't get to show up in my hospital, accuse me of betrayal, and then claim ownership over my relationships. I don't belong to you, Min Jae. I never did.
Liar. The word was soft. Almost gentle.
You belonged to me from the moment you took my hand in that ER 8 years ago. You belonged to me when you let me trace your grandmother's marks on your skin. You belonged to me when you whispered my name in the dark like a prayer. He reached out, slowly, deliberately, and caught her wrist. Her pulse hammered against his fingertips. You belonged to me, he continued, when you promised me forever. And you still belong to me now. Because I never let go, Amara. Even when I thought you had. Even when I spent 7 years telling myself I hated you. His thumb traced a circle on her inner wrist. I never learned how to stop belonging to you either.
Amara's breath caught.
The monitors betrayed them both now, his heart rate elevated, hers probably matching if she'd been hooked up to the same equipment.
The room felt too small.
The air felt too thick. The years between them felt simultaneously infinite and paper-thin. I can't do this, she whispered. Neither can I. His grip didn't loosen. And yet here we are.
The door opened.
Park Do-yoon stepped in, his expression shifting instantly from neutral to dangerous. Everything okay in here, Dr. Seon-wosu? Amara pulled her wrist free. Min Jae let her go, but his eyes tracked the movement like a hawk watching prey escape its talons.
Fine.
Her voice was steadier than she felt. Just discussing discharge planning.
Do-yoon looked between them. His jaw tightened.
I'll wait outside, he said. If you need anything. The emphasis on anything was impossible to miss. After Amara left, Min Jae allowed himself a moment of weakness. He pressed his palm against his chest, not the wound that was healing, but the older one beneath it. The one that had never closed. The one that had her name carved into its edges.
She still loved him.
He'd seen it in the way her pulse jumped when he touched her. In the way her eyes softened even as she tried to keep them hard. In the way she had saved his life when she could have let him die and been free of him forever.
She still loved him.
And someone had stolen 7 years from them. Someone had taken the woman he would have destroyed worlds for and turned her into a ghost.
Had forced her into hiding.
Had let him believe she had abandoned him. That someone was going to die.
Slowly. Painfully.
And with full knowledge of exactly why their existence was ending. 3 days after Min Jae's arrival, the hospital felt like a pressure cooker about to explode. Amara moved through her rounds with mechanical precision, hyper-aware of the security teams that seemed to multiply every time she turned a corner. Men in expensive suits with earpieces and cold eyes. Men who nodded at her with something that looked almost like respect.
Min Jae's men.
He was building a fortress around her, and she didn't know whether to feel protected or trapped. He's asking about you. Secretary Yoon appeared beside her in the cafeteria, his presence as unexpected as it was unnerving. He looked like any other businessman, neat suit, careful haircut, unremarkable features. Only his eyes gave him away.
They were too sharp. Too watchful. Excuse me. Chairman Kong.
Yoon slid into the seat across from her, his movements economical and precise. He asks about you constantly.
Your schedule. Your colleagues.
Your habits. Amara set down her chopsticks.
Tell him to stop.
I can't tell him anything. A ghost of a smile crossed Yoon's face. I've worked for him for 11 years. In that time, I've learned that Kong Min-jae does exactly what he wants, consequences be damned. And what he wants, Dr. Seon Wosu, is you. What do you want from me? Amara's voice was harder than she'd intended. Yoon didn't seem offended. I want you to understand something. He leaned forward slightly. When you disappeared, Chairman Kong became different. The man he was before, passionate, ambitious, occasionally reckless, died in that warehouse alongside the version of you who loved him openly. What emerged was the Black Crane. A man who feels nothing, fears nothing, loves nothing. He seems to feel plenty of hatred. Hatred is just love with nowhere to go. Yoon's eyes met hers directly. The fact that he hates you means some part of the man he was still exists. I've spent 11 years watching him bury that man deeper and deeper. You're the first thing that's made him dig.
Amara's throat tightened.
I'm not a resurrection story.
No.
Yoon stood, brushing invisible lint from his sleeve. You're a reckoning. For both of you. He walked away without looking back. That night, Amara found herself outside room 1701.
Not for rounds.
Not for medical necessity. Just, standing there, her hand raised to knock, her heart pounding against her ribs like a trapped bird. The door opened before she could make contact. Min Jae stood there, dressed now in clothes Yoon must have brought.
Black slacks.
Black turtleneck that covered the bandages but exposed the tattoos crawling up his neck. He looked like he'd never been wounded at all. He looked like the man she'd loved. He looked like danger incarnate. Couldn't sleep, he said simply, and stepped aside to let her in. The room had transformed. The hospital equipment was still there, but it felt like background noise now. Min Jae had made the space his own, files spread across the table, multiple phones charging, the scent of expensive tea mixing with antiseptic.
Sit, he said. Not an order.
Almost a request. Amara sat on the edge of the visitor's chair. Min Jae took the bed, watching her with that unnerving stillness that had always preceded his most important words. I've been investigating, he said finally. Investigating what? Your disappearance. He pulled a tablet from the bedside table, handed it to her. I wanted to hate you, Amara. I wanted to believe you had betrayed me. But the evidence doesn't support it. She looked down at the screen. And felt the blood drain from her face. Flight records. Immigration holds. Employment terminations. Medical license delays. 7 years of her life, laid out in data points that told a story of systematic persecution. Someone has been managing your life, Min Jae said quietly. Moving you around like a piece on a board. Preventing you from establishing roots, building connections, having any kind of stability. Amara's hands shook. You think I didn't know that? I think you knew and couldn't stop it. His voice was measured, but something volatile burned beneath the surface. What I want to know is who. Who has the resources to track you across 3 continents? Who has enough reach to block your medical licenses and flag your immigration status?
She couldn't answer. Couldn't look at him.
The truth was a weapon too dangerous to wield, and she had spent 7 years keeping it pointed at no one. The man who threatened you that night. Min Jae's voice dropped lower. What did he look like?
Silence. Amara. I can't. You can.
He was on his feet suddenly, crossing the space between them, dropping to his knees in front of her chair so that their eyes were level. His tattooed hands closed around hers. You can tell me because I'm the only person in the world with enough power to destroy whoever did this. You can tell me because I've spent 7 years becoming exactly the monster I needed to be to protect you.
Tears slipped down her cheeks.
And if protecting me gets you killed? Then I'll die doing what I should have done 7 years ago. His thumbs brushed across her knuckles. I'll die keeping you safe. The confession came out in fragments. A face half seen in warehouse shadows. A voice speaking Korean with an accent that suggested education abroad. A ring on his left hand, gold, with a symbol she had later learned belonged to one of Seoul's oldest families. Baek, Min Jae said quietly.
Baek Soo-hyun.
Amara's blood went cold. You know him? He was my father's business partner. Min Jae's expression darkened into something murderous. He was supposed to be an ally. He was supposed to be at that meeting to help negotiate the port expansion. The pieces fell into place with devastating clarity.
The assassination attempt, Amara whispered. It was an inside job.
And he took you as insurance. Min Jae's voice was terrifyingly calm. He knew I would tear the world apart looking for you. So he made sure the world didn't have you to find. The next morning, Amara performed rounds in a daze. Every face in the corridor looked like a potential threat. Every phone call made her flinch. She knew Min Jae was mobilizing, could feel the shift in the hospital's atmosphere as his people moved through it with increased purpose.
War was coming. And she was at the center of it.
You look terrible. Do-yoon fell into step beside her, his concern as genuine as it was unwelcome.
Thanks. I mean it.
He caught her arm, pulled her into an empty consultation room. What happened last night? You went to see him, didn't you?
Amara couldn't lie. Not to him. Yes. And
I told him things I shouldn't have.
She pulled free, paced to the window.
Things that are going to get people killed. Do-yoon was quiet for a long moment.
People like who? Like me.
Like my family.
Like, she stopped. Turned to face him.
Like anyone who tries to help me. Do-yoon crossed the room in 3 strides. His hands came up to cup her face, a gesture so intimate, so sudden, that Amara froze. Listen to me, he said urgently. I've watched you for 3 years. 3 years of you working harder than anyone, caring more than anyone, carrying weight that no one should carry alone. I don't know what you did before you came here. I don't know who you were or who you loved or what you lost. His thumbs brushed her cheekbones. But I know who you are now. And I'm not going to let some ghost from your past destroy that.
The door opened.
Min Jae stood in the threshold. His eyes, those cold, piercing eyes, tracked from Do-yoon's hands on Amara's face to the distance between their bodies to the look of guilt that flashed across her expression. He said nothing. He didn't need to. The temperature in the room dropped by several degrees.
Chairman Kong. Do-yoon released Amara, but he didn't step back. Didn't cower.
This is a private consultation. Nothing about her is private from me. Everything about her is private from you.
Do-yoon's jaw tightened.
You're a patient in this hospital. She's your physician. That's the extent of your relationship. Min Jae smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. Is that what you tell yourself? That I'm just a patient? He stepped into the room, the door swinging shut behind him. That the woman you're touching right now isn't carrying my name carved into her heart?
Min Jae, Amara started.
That she doesn't whisper my name in her nightmares? He continued as if she hadn't spoken. That she didn't spend 3 years working herself to exhaustion trying to forget what I felt like inside her.
Enough.
Do-yoon moved forward, putting himself between Amara and Min Jae. I don't care who you are, he said quietly. I don't care what power you have or what you can do. If you threaten her again, if you make her cry one more time, I will destroy you myself. Min Jae studied him with something that might have been respect.
You love her.
It wasn't a question.
Yes.
Does she love you back?
Silence.
Min Jae looked past Do-yoon to where Amara stood frozen against the window.
Does she, Amara?
The word no sat on her tongue like a stone. She should say yes. Should claim Do-yoon as a shield, as an escape, as a future that didn't involve buried warehouses and blood-soaked promises.
He was good. He was safe.
He would never make her feel like she was drowning in someone else's obsession.
But she couldn't lie.
Not about this. Not with Min Jae's eyes burning through her like a brand.
I care about him, she said finally.
He's been the only friend I've had since I came back to Seoul. That's not what I asked. I know what you asked.
Her voice cracked.
And you know the answer. You've always known the answer. You just want me to say it out loud so you can use it against me.
Min Jae moved. Fast. Fluid.
The movement of a predator who has spotted wounded prey. He was past Do-yoon before the other man could react, his tattooed hands closing around Amara's arms, pulling her close enough that their breath mingled. I want you to say it, he agreed, because I've spent 7 years listening to silence. 7 years wondering if everything I felt was a delusion. 7 years.
His voice broke.
Actually broke, like something inside him had finally shattered. 7 years trying to hate you hard enough to stop loving you. Amara's tears fell freely now. Did it work? What do you think? Do-yoon's voice cut through the moment. Let her go. Min Jae didn't release her.
But his grip softened.
His thumbs traced absent patterns on her arms. The same patterns she remembered from a lifetime ago, when they would lie tangled together and he would tell her she was the only beautiful thing in his world of darkness. If I let her go, he said quietly, she'll disappear again.
Someone will take her. Someone will threaten her.
Someone will remind her that loving me is dangerous, and she'll run. That's her choice to make. Her choices have been stolen from her for 7 years. Min Jae's eyes finally left Amara's face to fix on Do-yoon. I'm giving them back.
All of them.
Including the choice to leave me forever if that's what she wants.
He released her. Stepped back.
The loss of his warmth was devastating.
Choose, Min Jae said. Here. Now. This room. This moment.
Amara stared at him through tear-blurred vision. That's not fair. Nothing about us has ever been fair.
His voice was raw.
You were ripped away from me. I became a monster to survive it. Now we're standing in a room with a man who loves you the way I should have been able to, openly, safely, without the shadow of violence hanging over every moment. He gestured toward Do-yoon.
He can give you peace.
I can only give you war.
Min Jae.
But I can also give you vengeance. His eyes darkened. I can find everyone who hurt you and make them understand exactly what it costs to touch what's mine. I can burn Baek Soo-hyun's empire to the ground and salt the earth where it stood. I can ensure that no one ever threatens you again. He reached up, touched her cheek with heartbreaking gentleness. I can love you the way I should have all along, not as something to possess, but as something to protect. If you let me. The silence stretched between them. Do-yoon stood watching, his expression unreadable but his body tense. Ready to intervene. Ready to fight for her if she asked. Amara looked at him, really looked at him, and saw everything she should want. Stability. Safety. A future that didn't involve bulletproof cars and armed guards. Then she looked at Min Jae. And saw everything she actually needed. The darkness that matched her own. The wounds that mirrored her scars. The love that had survived betrayal and abandonment and 7 years of believing lies. I can't choose, she whispered. Not like this. Not yet. Min Jae's expression didn't change. But something in his eyes dimmed. A light extinguishing itself to protect against further damage. Then I'll wait. He stepped back, his movements controlled despite the evident pain the gesture caused him. I've waited 7 years. I can wait longer. He moved toward the door. Stopped with his hand on the handle. But know this, Amara, he didn't turn around. Baek Soo-hyun is going to die for what he did to us. You can't stop that. You shouldn't want to. And when it's over, when you're truly free for the first time in 7 years, I'll be here. He left. The door clicked shut behind him. And Amara collapsed into the chair by the window, her body shaking with sobs she couldn't control. 2 days passed. Min Jae was discharged from the hospital, officially recovered, though Amara suspected he had been healed enough to leave for days and had simply refused to go. He'd been waiting for something. For her, maybe. For answers. For the conversation they'd finally had in the consultation room. Now he was gone. And the hospital felt emptier than it had any right to. You're making a mistake. Do-yoon found her in the rooftop garden, a space usually reserved for patients who needed fresh air and families who needed privacy to grieve. It was raining, A soft, persistent soul rain that misted rather than poured.
Amara didn't look up.
Which mistake specifically? Letting him back into your head. Do-yoon sat beside her on the wet bench, apparently unconcerned about ruining his scrubs. You'd finally started to heal. I could see it happening, the way you laughed more, worried less. The way you started actually sleeping through the night. How do you know I was sleeping through the night? The dark circles under your eyes aren't as deep as they used to be.
He shrugged. I pay attention.
Amara finally turned to face him.
Do-yoon. Her voice was gentle.
Regretful. You know I care about you. But you don't love me. It wasn't a question.
I tried.
The confession cost her something.
I tried so hard.
You're everything I should want.
Kind. Stable. Present.
You see me, not some version of me you want to possess.
But
I can't give you something that isn't mine to give. She reached for his hand, squeezed it. My heart's been claimed since I was 23 years old. I thought I could take it back. I thought if I just stayed away long enough, worked hard enough, built a different life.
She trailed off.
But he found you anyway, Do-yoon finished. He didn't find me. Amara laughed bitterly. The universe found us. Someone shot him and brought him to my operating room and put his life literally in my hands. How am I supposed to interpret that as anything other than fate screaming at me that I was never going to be free? Do-yoon was quiet for a long moment. Then he stood, pulling her up with him. Then stopped trying to be free. His voice was thick with emotion, but his words were steady. Stop running from whatever this is.
Face it.
Survive it. And if there's anything left when the dust settles. He leaned in, pressed a gentle kiss to her forehead. You know where to find me.
He walked away.
And Amara stood alone in the rain, feeling more lost than she had in years.
That night, her phone buzzed. Unknown number.
Encrypted message.
He knows you talked. He's coming.
You need to disappear again.
Why?
Amara's blood went cold. Secretary Yoon.
Warning her.
Which meant Min Jae had confronted Baek Soo-hyun. Had made his move. Had started the war that would either free her or destroy them both.
She had to run. She had to.
Another message. Stay where you are.
Trust him. Why?
3 hours later, Amara's apartment door exploded inward. She scrambled backward, her medical training noting the details even as terror flooded her system. 2 men in tactical gear. Suppressors on their weapons. Professional entrance. Professional target acquisition. Dr. Seon-wosu. The first man's voice was cold. You're coming with us. I'm not going anywhere. That wasn't a request.
They moved toward her.
She grabbed the lamp from her bedside table. Stupid, useless, but it was something.
A weapon.
A gesture of resistance. Then glass shattered. The window behind her attackers exploded inward as a body came through it. Black tactical gear, face obscured by a balaclava, moving with lethal precision. The first attacker went down with a broken neck. The second managed to fire once before a knife took him in the throat. And then there was silence. The figure removed his balaclava. Min Jae. Blood spattered across his cheekbone. Murder in his eyes. And something else, something desperate, as he crossed the room and pulled her into his arms. You're okay. His voice was ragged. Tell me you're okay. I'm okay. She was shaking so hard her teeth chattered. Min Jae. What did you do? What I should have done 7 years ago. He pulled back just enough to frame her face with his tattooed hands.
Baek Soo-hyun is dead.
His organization is burning as we speak. Every person who helped him, every person who threatened you, every person who stole our years from us, they're all answering for it tonight. Amara should have felt relief. Instead, she felt terror. You killed him. Yes. You killed people to get to me. I would kill everyone in this city to get to you.
Min Jae's voice was calm. Too calm.
I would burn the entire peninsula. I would destroy everything I've built and everything I might build. Because none of it means anything without you. That's not love, she whispered. That's obsession. They feel the same to me. She should run. Every rational part of her brain screamed that she should run, should call the police, should find Do-yoon and disappear into the life she'd been building before Min Jae crashed back into her orbit. Instead, she reached up and touched the blood on his cheek.
You're hurt.
It's not my blood. You should still let me look.
He kissed her. Not gently.
Not romantically. He kissed her like a drowning man kisses air, desperate, consuming, necessary for survival. His tattooed hands tangled in her hair, pulling her closer, erasing the distance between them that 7 years of separation had created. She should push him away. She kissed him back instead. When they finally broke apart, both of them were breathing hard. I need you to know something, Min-jae said quietly. I'm not asking you to forgive me.
For what I've become. For what I've done tonight.
I'm not even asking you to love me, though God knows I've never wanted anything more. Then what are you asking?
Stay. The word broke him open.
Let me protect you. Let me give you the life that was stolen from us. Let me spend whatever years I have left proving that the monster I became was only ever a man who couldn't survive losing you. Amara's tears fell silently.
And if I can't?
If I can't live with the blood on your hands, even if it was spilled for me. Something in Min-jae's expression shifted. The vulnerability closed back up, replaced by that familiar mask of control. But she saw the moment of hesitation. The flash of fear that she might actually leave. Then I'll let you go. His voice was quiet but steady. I meant what I said in that hospital room. I'm giving you back your choices.
All of them.
Including the choice to walk away from me forever.
He released her. Stepped back.
The distance between them felt infinite. But before you choose, he continued, I need you to see something. I need you to understand why I became what I became.
What I built. Who I did it for.
He extended his hand.
Come with me. One night. Then decide.
Amara looked at his hand, the tattooed fingers, the calluses from weapons he'd learned to use in her absence, the evidence of violence that he'd committed in her name.
She should refuse. She should call the police.
She should do anything except take the hand of a man who had just killed for her.
She took his hand.
Min-jae leads Amara into the heart of his empire, where she will discover the evidence that he's been protecting her for 7 years without ever knowing she was alive. The truth about her drugging, her framing, and the depth of Baek Soo-hyun's betrayal will finally come to light. But even as the past becomes clear, a new threat emerges, one that will force Amara to choose between her oath as a healer and her love for a man who kills without hesitation. The storm is far from over. The black SUV cut through Seoul's rain-slicked streets like a blade through silk. Amara sat in the back seat, her fingers still trembling from the violence she had witnessed. Beside her, Min-jae was a statue of controlled stillness, his blood-stained hands resting on his thighs, his eyes fixed on the city lights bleeding past the tinted windows. Neither of them spoke. The silence between them was a living thing, thick with questions neither was ready to ask. They drove for 30 minutes. The city changed around them, from the clinical brightness of Gangnam to older neighborhoods where neon gave way to shadow, then further still into industrial districts where warehouses crouched like sleeping giants. Finally, the SUV stopped before a building that looked like an abandoned factory. Where are we? Amara's voice came out smaller than she intended.
Home.
Min-jae stepped out, extending his hand to help her. Or what passes for it? The exterior was a lie. Inside, the factory had been transformed into something between a fortress and a museum. Concrete floors polished to a mirror shine. Steel beams left exposed but painted matte black. Art on the walls, Korean traditional pieces alongside contemporary African works that made Amara's breath catch. You collected these, she whispered, stopping before a painting she recognized. A Yoruba ceremonial scene, all rich colors and sacred geometry. I collected everything that reminded me of you. Min-jae's voice was quiet behind her. Every time I wanted to forget, I bought something that made forgetting impossible. He led her deeper into the building. Past security checkpoints manned by men who bowed as they passed. Past offices where screens displayed data she couldn't interpret. Past a medical wing that looked better equipped than some hospitals she'd worked in. Finally, they reached a door that required his fingerprint, retinal scan, and a code. This is the only room in the building I've never let anyone else enter, he said.
Not my lieutenants.
Not my secretary.
No one. The door opened.
And Amara's world collapsed.
The room was a shrine. Not to her, not exactly. To the search for her.
Maps covered every wall, marked with pins and strings connecting locations across 3 continents. Filing cabinets lined one entire side, their labels bearing dates that spanned 7 years. Computer screens showed databases still running searches, still cross-referencing, still hunting for a woman who had been standing in a Seoul hospital all along. I never stopped looking. Min-jae's voice was hollow.
Haunted.
Amara moved through the room in a daze. Her fingers traced the pins on the map: Lagos, Busan, Singapore, London, New York. Every city she had hidden in. Every place she had tried to build a life.
You found me, she whispered. Multiple times. These pins.
I found traces of you. He stood in the doorway, watching her with an expression that bordered on anguish.
Shadows. Echoes.
By the time my people arrived, you were always gone. I thought you were running from me. The truth hit her like a physical blow. Every time she had been forced to relocate. Every job that had mysteriously fallen through. Every apartment she had been evicted from without explanation. It hadn't just been Baek Soo-hyun keeping her hidden. It had been Baek staying one step ahead of Min Jae's search. He was watching you, Amara said slowly, the pieces falling into place. He knew you were looking for me. Every time you got close. He moved you.
Min Jae's jaw tightened. Like a chess piece.
Keeping you just out of reach. Making me believe you didn't want to be found. Amara sank into the nearest chair, her legs unable to support her. All those years, she breathed. I thought you had forgotten me. I thought you had moved on. I read about you in the news, the Black Crane, rising to power, expanding your empire, and I thought you'd replaced me with power and violence. I replaced nothing. Min Jae crossed the room, knelt before her chair. I became powerful because power was the only thing that might eventually find you. I became violent because violence was the only language that the people hiding you understood. His tattooed hands closed over hers. Everything I built was a search party. Every alliance I formed, every enemy I crushed, every territory I claimed, it was all just me screaming into the void, hoping you might hear me. Tears streamed down Amara's face. You should have let me go.
I couldn't.
You should have built a real life.
Found someone else. Been happy.
There is no happy without you. His voice cracked on the words. There is no someone else.
There is only you, Amara.
There has only ever been you. He reached up, brushed the tears from her cheeks with a tenderness that contradicted every violent thing she knew about him. I'm sorry, he whispered. I'm sorry I wasn't strong enough to protect you then. I'm sorry I became something that frightens you now. I'm sorry that loving me has cost you so much.
Don't.
Amara shook her head, pulled one hand free to press her fingers against his lips. Don't apologize for surviving. I did terrible things too, things I'm not proud of.
I lied. I hid.
I let myself believe you had abandoned me because it was easier than hoping. She traced the line of his jaw, feeling the tension coiled beneath his skin. We were both victims of the same betrayal. We both became different people to survive it. The question is...
She hesitated.
The question is whether those different people can still love each other. Min Jae turned his face into her palm, pressing a kiss to the center of it. I never stopped loving you. Not for a single moment of a single day. Even when you hated me?
Especially then.
His eyes met hers, and for the first time since she had found him in that hospital bed, she saw the man beneath the monster. Hatred was just love with nowhere to go. It was easier to believe you had betrayed me than to accept that someone had taken you against your will and I had been too weak to stop them. The weight of 7 years hung between them. 7 years of grief. 7 years of transformation. 7 years of becoming people who might not recognize the lovers they had once been. But beneath all of that, beneath the blood and the lies and the desperate survival, something remained. Something that had refused to die no matter how hard they both had tried to kill it.
Show me, Amara whispered. Show me who you've become. All of it. The empire. The violence. The man they call the Black Crane. I can't decide anything until I understand what I'm choosing. Min Jae studied her face for a long moment. Then he nodded. Everything, he agreed. No more secrets. No more shadows. You want to see the monster? I'll show you the monster. He stood, offering his hand once more. And then you can decide whether the monster is worth saving. The tour took 3 hours. Min Jae showed her the legitimate face of his empire first, the logistics company that moved goods across Asia, the shipping concerns that linked Seoul to Lagos to Singapore, the real estate holdings that included some of the most expensive properties in the city. Then he showed her the rest. The port operations are where most of the actual work happens. They stood on a rooftop overlooking Incheon Harbor, the lights of cargo ships twinkling in the dark water. The rain had stopped, but moisture still hung in the air, turning everything soft and dreamlike. Work, Amara repeated carefully. You mean? Smuggling. Weapons, mostly. Some pharmaceuticals that haven't been approved through official channels. Nothing that directly harms innocents, but nothing legal either.
Min Jae's voice was matter-of-fact.
Unashamed.
I made a choice years ago, he continued. I could stay legitimate and stay powerless, or I could become something the underworld respected and use that power to protect what mattered. And what mattered was finding me. What mattered was being strong enough to destroy anyone who might have hurt you.
Amara turned to face him.
The wind caught her hair, sending it streaming behind her like a banner. The city lights reflected in her dark eyes. How many people have you killed?
Min Jae didn't flinch. Personally? 17.
Including the 2 tonight. And indirectly? I don't keep count of those.
His jaw tightened. I give orders. My people execute them.
The blood is on my hands regardless of who actually spills it. Does it bother you?
Silence.
Then, it used to. The first time I killed a man, I couldn't sleep for a week. The second time was easier.
By the 5th time.
He looked away, toward the harbor. By the 5th time, I realized I had become exactly what I needed to be to survive in this world. A man who could do terrible things and still wake up the next morning. And the tattoos? Amara reached out, pushing back the collar of his shirt to reveal the crane inked across his throat. Her fingers traced the elaborate design, wings spread, neck curved, every feather rendered in exquisite detail. What do they mean? Min Jae caught her hand, held it against his chest. The crane is for longevity. Endurance. The ability to outlast your enemies. He guided her fingers down, to where Korean characters disappeared beneath his clothing. These names are the people I've lost.
My mother.
My first lieutenant, who died taking a bullet meant for me.
His voice dropped. And here.
He pulled his shirt aside, revealing a design over his heart that made Amara's breath stop.
Adinkra symbols. Yoruba.
The same sacred geometry from her grandmother's village, woven into an elaborate pattern that wrapped around a single word in Korean.
Amara.
When did you?
The first year.
His eyes held hers, intense and unwavering. I thought you were dead at first. Or that you wanted to be dead to me. Either way, I needed something permanent. Something that would remind me every day that I had failed to protect the only person I ever loved. Amara's hand pressed flat against the tattoo, feeling his heart beat beneath her palm. This isn't a memorial, she whispered. This is a wound you refused to let heal.
Yes.
You carried me with you. All those years. All those battles. All those kills. You're the reason I survived them. Min Jae's hand covered hers. Every time I thought about giving up, about letting someone faster or stronger finally end it, I would touch this and remember that somewhere in the world, there might still be answers. There might still be you. They returned to the fortress as dawn broke over Seoul. The city was waking up around them, street vendors setting up their stalls, salary workers emerging from subway stations, the eternal hum of urban life resuming its rhythm. But inside the converted factory, the world felt suspended.
Waiting.
I need to ask you something, Min Jae said as they entered his private quarters. And I need you to answer honestly.
Amara tensed. What?
The night of the warehouse. He poured 2 glasses of water from a crystal decanter, handed her one. What do you actually remember? The question unlocked something she had kept sealed for 7 years. Amara sank onto the leather sofa, her fingers wrapped around the glass, her eyes unfocused as the memories surfaced. We were supposed to meet the Port Authority officials. You said it was just formalities, signing papers, exchanging pleasantries. I came because you asked me to translate for the Nigerian representatives who were flying in. I remember. Everything was fine until it wasn't.
She closed her eyes.
One moment we were in the conference room, the next there was gunfire. You pushed me behind you.
You were shouting orders.
And then someone grabbed me from behind.
Min Jae sat across from her, his posture tense.
I felt a needle in my neck, Amara continued. Whatever they used worked fast. My legs stopped responding.
My vision blurred.
The last thing I saw clearly was you, on the ground bleeding, reaching for me while I was being dragged away.
Her voice cracked.
I tried to scream your name. But nothing came out.
And then, darkness.
When did you wake up?
I don't know. Hours later.
Days, maybe. I was in a shipping container. There was a man there, the one with the gold ring. He told me what would happen to everyone I loved if I didn't disappear. Min Jae's hands had curled into fists, the veins standing out beneath his tattooed skin.
He showed me photographs, Amara whispered.
My brother at his school in Lagos. My mother at the market. My cousin at university. All of them going about their lives, completely unaware that someone was watching. Waiting for permission to destroy them.
Amara.
He told me you had asked for it. That you had arranged the whole thing to get rid of me cleanly. That you were bored with your Nigerian plaything and wanted to move on to someone more appropriate. The glass in Min Jae's hand shattered. Blood welled from his palm, mixing with the water on the floor, but he didn't seem to notice.
He told you what?
I didn't believe him. Tears streamed down Amara's face.
Not at first.
But he had evidence, photographs, documents, recordings. He made it sound so plausible. The Mafia heir, tired of his exotic distraction, arranging for her to disappear so he could marry someone acceptable to his family. That was never, I would never. I know that now. She reached out, took his bleeding hand in hers. I think I knew it then too.
Deep down.
But I was drugged and terrified and they were threatening everyone I loved. I couldn't think clearly.
I couldn't.
She broke off, her shoulders shaking with sobs. I just wanted to keep my family safe. I just wanted the fear to stop. So I did what he told me. I disappeared. And I spent 7 years telling myself I had done the right thing. Min Jae pulled her into his arms. He held her the way he should have held her 7 years ago, desperately, protectively, like if he just held on tight enough, no one would ever be able to take her again. I'm going to find everyone who touched you that night, he said into her hair. Everyone who helped Beck. Everyone who knew and said nothing. And I'm going to make them understand exactly what it costs to hurt you. Most of them are probably already dead. Amara's voice was muffled against his chest. You've been at war with Beck for years. Then I'll find their families.
Their friends.
Their legacies. And I'll ensure that their names become synonymous with failure and disgrace.
Min Jae.
I'm not asking for permission. He pulled back just enough to meet her eyes. I'm telling you what's going to happen. Vengeance isn't negotiable. Justice isn't optional. The only question is whether you want to watch.
3 days passed.
Amara stayed at the fortress, officially on medical leave from the hospital. Do-yoon covered her patients without asking questions, a kindness she didn't deserve but desperately needed. Min Jae's war continued outside those walls, but inside, they existed in a fragile bubble of rediscovery. They talked for hours, about the years they had lost, the people they had become, the wounds they carried. They ate meals together, traditional Korean dishes alongside Nigerian recipes that Min Jae's kitchen staff had somehow learned to prepare. They fell asleep on the same couch, not quite touching, but close enough that Amara could feel his warmth. They did not kiss again. Not yet. Not until the foundations were rebuilt enough to hold the weight of that intimacy.
On the 4th day, the bubble burst. Amara woke to shouting.
She emerged from the guest room to find Min Jae in the main hall, surrounded by his lieutenants, all of them armed and radiating tension. What's happening? Min Jae's head snapped toward her. Something in his expression made her blood run cold. Your brother, he said quietly. He's been taken.
The world stopped. What do you mean, taken?
Beck had contingencies. Min Jae's jaw was tight enough to crack. Apparently killing him didn't end all of his operations. There was a failsafe, instructions to retaliate against your family if anything happened to him. Amara's legs buckled. Strong arms caught her, Min Jae's arms, but she barely felt them. Chidi. Her brother's name was a prayer. A plea. He's only 20. He's in medical school. He has nothing to do with any of this. I know. Min Jae guided her to a chair, his hands steady even as rage burned in his eyes. I have people en route to Lagos now. We'll find him.
En route?
That's ours.
That's too long.
He could be. He's alive. Min Jae's voice was steel. They need him alive to leverage against you.
Against me.
As long as they think they can use him, they'll keep him breathing. The next 12 hours were the longest of Amara's life. She watched Min Jae coordinate operations across 2 continents, phone calls in rapid Korean, video conferences with hard-faced men in tactical gear, maps and satellite imagery spreading across screens like evidence in a murder trial.
Do-yoon called twice.
She didn't answer. Her mother called 7 times. Amara spoke to her once, lying through her teeth about Chidi being unreachable due to a study retreat, praying that her voice didn't betray her terror. Min Jae didn't sleep. Didn't eat. Barely drank the coffee his staff kept pressing into his hands. He was a machine of focused destruction, dismantling Beck's remaining network piece by piece, node by node, until there was nowhere left for Chidi's captors to hide. At 3 a.m., the call came.
We have him.
Min Jae's entire body sagged with relief. He looked at Amara, who was curled in a chair across the room, and nodded.
Alive. Roughed up. Scared.
But alive. Bring him to the Lagos safe house. Full medical evaluation. I want a doctor with him at all times until we can arrange secure transport back to Seoul.
Understood, sir. The call ended.
Amara was in Min Jae's arms before she could think.
Thank you.
She was crying, had been crying for hours probably, but these tears felt different.
Cleaner. Thank you. Thank you.
He's your brother. Min Jae's arms tightened around her. He's family. There is nothing I wouldn't do to protect your family. She pulled back just enough to look at his face. The exhaustion there was profound. Dark circles under his eyes. Tension lines carved around his mouth. A man who had pushed himself to the breaking point for someone he had never met, simply because that someone mattered to her.
You need to sleep, she whispered.
I'll sleep when he's on a plane to Seoul. You'll collapse before then. Then I'll collapse. His smile was ghost-thin but genuine. Wouldn't be the first time. Amara made a decision. Come with me. She took his hand, led him toward his private quarters. He followed without protest, too tired to argue perhaps, or too surprised by her sudden assertiveness. Inside his bedroom, a space she had not yet entered, she guided him to the bed.
Sit. He sat.
She knelt before him, removed his shoes. Then she stood, pushed gently on his shoulders until he lay back against the pillows.
Sleep, she ordered. 2 hours.
Your people can wake you if anything changes.
Amara.
I'll be right here. She climbed onto the bed beside him, settling against the pillows with a careful distance between them. I'll wake you if anything happens. Min Jae's eyes searched her face. You're staying. I'm staying. Something in his expression broke open, a vulnerability so raw that it hurt to witness. I thought you would run, he whispered. When you saw what I really am. When you understood what I've built and what I'm capable of. I thought you would realize you deserved better and disappear again. I tried that once.
Amara's voice was soft. Disappearing.
It didn't work. Because they caught you. Because I couldn't stop loving you. She reached out, brushed hair from his forehead. Even when I thought you'd betrayed me. Even when I tried to hate you. I couldn't stop. Min Jae caught her hand, pressed it against his chest. Right over the tattoo that bore her name. Then stay. His voice was barely audible. Not because I saved your brother. Not because you feel obligated. Stay because... He trailed off, exhaustion finally claiming him. But Amara finished the sentence in her own heart. Stay because love that survives this much destruction deserves a chance to rebuild. Chitty arrived in Seoul 3 days later. Amara met the private plane at a small airfield outside the city, Min Jae beside her with a security detail that could have protected a head of state. When her brother emerged from the aircraft, bandaged, exhausted, but alive, she collapsed into his arms with a sob that came from somewhere primal.
Sis. Chitty's voice cracked.
I thought I was dead.
I thought. Sure. She held him tighter.
You're safe now.
You're safe.
Over his shoulder, she saw Min Jae watching them with an expression that made her heart ache. He was giving them space. Standing back with his hands in his pockets, his security team forming a discreet perimeter, his face carefully blank. As if he didn't belong in this moment of family reunion. As if he didn't understand that he was the reason this reunion was possible at all. Amara released Chitty and crossed to Min Jae. Without hesitation, she took his hand and led him back to her brother. Chitty, she said quietly, this is Kong Min Jae. He's the one who found you. He's the reason you're alive. Chitty studied the man before him. The tattoos, the cold eyes, the barely contained lethality that hung around him like a cloak. Then he extended his hand. Thank you, he said simply. For my sister. For everything. Min Jae took his hand, and something in his expression softened. Your sister saved my life first. I owed her a debt I could never repay. He released Chitty's hand, glanced at Amara. I'm still trying to repay it. Chitty looked between them with the perception of someone who had grown up reading people to survive. You love her, he observed. Min Jae didn't hesitate. More than I've ever loved anything in my life. The weeks that followed were a slow healing. Chitty stayed at the fortress, recovering from his ordeal while completing his medical studies remotely. Min Jae arranged tutors, equipment, whatever he needed, all without being asked, all without expecting thanks. Amara returned to work at the hospital, but something had shifted. The weight she had carried for 7 years was finally lifting. The constant fear, the endless vigilance, the exhausting pretense of being someone she wasn't, all of it was fading. For the first time since she was 25 years old, she could imagine a future. A future that included him. "You've been avoiding me."
Min Jae's voice startled her.
She was in the hospital's rooftop garden again, watching the Seoul skyline glitter in the evening light. "I've been working." "You've been thinking." He moved to stand beside her, close enough that their shoulders almost touched.
"Deciding." Amara sighed.
"You know me too well. I've spent 7 years studying your ghost. The real thing isn't that different." He turned to face her fully. "What have you decided?" She took her time answering. "I've decided that I'm tired of being afraid. I'm tired of running. I'm tired of pretending that the safest choice is the same as the right choice." "And what's the right choice?"
Amara met his eyes. "You."
Min Jae went very still. "Say that again." "You." She reached up, cupped his face in her hands. "With all your violence and your obsession and your terrifying loyalty. With all your tattoos and your empire and your inability to let go of things you love. You, Min Jae. I choose you. Even knowing what I am? Because of what you are." Her thumbs traced his cheekbones. "You became a monster to find me. You built an empire to protect me. You burned down everyone who hurt me, and you would do it again without hesitation." She leaned closer. "That's not something to be ashamed of. That's something to be awed by."
"Amara.
I love you." The words came easier than she expected.
"I never stopped.
Even when I thought you'd betrayed me. Even when I tried to forget you. Even when I told myself I could build a life without you." She smiled, a real smile, the first one in years that reached her eyes. "I love you, Kong Min Jae. And I'm done running from that."
He kissed her.
Not like before, not desperate, not consuming. This kiss was a question and an answer all at once.
Soft. Trembling.
The kiss of a man who had been waiting 7 years for permission to hope. When they broke apart, he pressed his forehead against hers. "I don't deserve this," he whispered.
"Probably not.
I'll spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of it."
"I know.
"And if I fail, if the monster wins?" She silenced him with another kiss. "Then I'll drag you back."
Her voice was fierce.
"Because you're mine, Min Jae. You've always been mine. And I don't abandon what's mine."
1 month later.
The rooftop of Min Jae's fortress had been transformed. Strings of lights hung between steel beams, their glow soft and golden against the night sky. A traditional Korean altar stood at one end, adorned with white flowers and candles. Beside it, a smaller altar bore Nigerian symbols, Adinkra designs in gold, traditional fabrics in deep reds and greens.
2 cultures. 2 families. 1 love. The guest list was small.
Chitty, still recovering but refusing to miss this moment. Secretary Yoon, looking mildly uncomfortable in anything other than tactical gear. A few of Min Jae's most trusted lieutenants. Do Yoon, who had received the invitation with grace and arrived with genuine good wishes. And at the altar, waiting with barely contained anticipation, Min Jae. He wore a traditional hanbok in deep black, embroidered with cranes in silver thread. His tattoos were visible above the collar, deliberately, proudly. Symbols of what he had survived. Evidence of what he was willing to become for love.
The music began. Not Korean.
Not Nigerian. Something in between, a melody that had been composed specifically for this moment, blending instruments from both cultures into a harmony that should not have worked but somehow did. Amara appeared at the far end of the rooftop. She wore white, a dress that merged Korean bridal traditions with Nigerian beadwork, the fabric flowing around her like water, her mother's jewelry glinting at her throat and wrists. Her natural hair was styled in elaborate braids threaded with gold, her deep skin glowing in the candlelight. She was, Min Jae thought, the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. She was walking toward him. She was choosing him. The ceremony was brief. They exchanged vows in 3 languages, Korean, Yoruba, and English, each promise carrying the weight of their history. "I vow to protect you," Min Jae said quietly, "with every resource I have and every weapon I can wield. I vow to love you openly, without shame, without secrecy. I vow to spend every day of my life proving that the man you chose is worthy of your choice."
Amara's eyes glistened.
"I vow to heal you," she replied, "when you're wounded. To ground you when you're lost. To remind you of the man beneath the monster when you forget he exists. I vow to love you through every darkness, every violence, every impossible challenge that this life will throw at us. She reached up, touched the tattoo at his throat. I vow to stay. They sealed the vows with a kiss. This time, there was nothing tentative about it. Nothing questioning. It was a declaration, a claiming, a promise written in the language of touch. When they broke apart, the small gathering erupted in applause. But Min-jae barely heard it. He was too busy looking at his wife, and marveling at the impossible reality of this moment. 7 years ago, he had watched her disappear and thought his life was over. Now she was beside him, wearing his ring, bearing his name, building a future with him that neither of them had dared to imagine. Dawn crept through the windows of the master suite. Amara lay tangled in sheets that smelled like Min-jae, her body warm and loose, her mind finally, at peace. Beside her, he slept with his face soft and unguarded, the tension that perpetually lined his features smoothed away. She traced the tattoo over his heart. Amara. Her name, written in ink and pain, and 7 years of refusal to let go. That tickles. His voice was rough with sleep, but his eyes were warm when they opened. Sorry. Don't be. He caught her hand, pressed a kiss to her palm. I've spent 7 years imagining you touching me again. Reality is better. Amara smiled. Reality is usually disappointing. Not this time. He pulled her closer, tucking her against his chest. This time, reality is everything I dreamed of and more. They lay in comfortable silence for a while, watching the light change, feeling each other breathe. I have to go back to work tomorrow, Amara said eventually. I've taken too much leave already. I could buy the hospital. Install you as chief of surgery. You could. She pinched his side. But you won't. Because I need to earn things for myself. Not have them handed to me by my obscenely powerful husband. Min-jae laughed, a real laugh full and warm. I love hearing you call me that. What obscenely powerful? Husband. He kissed her forehead. I wasn't sure I would ever hear that word from you. What happens now? Amara asked quietly. With your business. With everything. Min-jae was silent for a moment. I've been thinking about that, he said finally. The empire I built was designed for war. For searching. For destroying anyone who stood between me and finding you. But now that I've found you. He trailed off, choosing his words carefully. I don't want that life for us. For our children, if we have them. I want to build something different. Something that doesn't require blood to maintain. Is that even possible? To step away. It will take time. Years, probably. But yes. His arms tightened around her. I've already started transitioning the more problematic aspects of the operation. Selling them off. Shutting them down. By the time we're ready to start a family, Kong Enterprises will be legitimate enough that our children can inherit it without inheriting the violence. Amara pulled back just enough to look at his face. You've already started. I started the night I woke up in your hospital and realized I might have a chance to keep you. His eyes met hers, open and vulnerable. Everything changed that night. Everything I thought I wanted. Everything I thought I had to be. You reminded me that I used to be a man who believed in more than power and revenge. And now. Now I believe in you. He kissed her, soft, sweet, unhurried. I believe in us. And I'm willing to become whoever I need to be to deserve the life you're offering me. The rain had cleared. Seoul sparkled beneath a fresh-washed sky, the city renewed by the storm that had swept through overnight. On the rooftop of what was now officially called Seokong Tower, a compromise name that made both families happy, a celebration was underway. Not a wedding this time. Something even more important. Amara stood at the center of the gathering, radiant in a deep red dress that flowed over the subtle swell of her belly. Min-jae stood beside her, his hand resting protectively over hers, both of them positioned before a small altar covered in flowers and family photographs. We're here to announce the name, Amara said, her voice carrying across the assembled guests. As is tradition in my family, the name was chosen by the eldest female relative. She glanced at the video screen where her mother appeared, beaming through happy tears from Lagos. Mama, would you like to do the honors? Mrs. Nwosu's voice crackled through the speakers, thick with emotion. My grandson will be called Chukwemeka de Yongkong. Chukwemeka, God has done great things. Because God brought my daughter back from the dead. God gave her a man who would fight the entire world for her. And God blessed them with this child, who will carry both his cultures proudly. The guests erupted in applause. Min Jae leaned close to Amara's ear.
Chukwamika, he repeated softly.
I'm going to need practice with that.
You have 6 months, she whispered back.
I expect perfection.
You'll have it. He kissed her temple.
You always will. Later that night, after the guests had gone and the caterers had cleaned up and Chitty had retired to his guest suite, Min Jae stood with Amara on the rooftop's edge. The city sprawled before them, millions of lights, millions of lives, millions of stories playing out beneath the stars. Thank you, he said quietly.
For what?
For surviving. He pulled her close, his tattooed hands splaying protectively over her belly.
For coming back.
For forgiving me even though I hadn't done anything to deserve it. You didn't need to do anything. Amara leaned back against his chest. You just needed to be the man I remembered. The one who looked at me like I was the only light in his darkness. The one who learned my grandmother's songs. The one who promised me forever and meant it.
I still mean it.
I know. They stood in silence, watching the city breathe. So much had changed since that night in the hospital. So much healing had happened, not just of physical wounds, but of hearts that had been shattered by betrayal and rebuilt by love. The Black Crane was still feared in certain circles. Kang Min-jae's reputation hadn't softened entirely. But the man behind the legend had evolved, become something more than just a weapon, more than just a searcher, more than just a survivor.
He had become a husband. Soon, he would become a father.
And standing there with Amara in his arms, watching the rain-washed city sparkle beneath them, he finally understood what all those years of violence and obsession had been building toward.
Not power. Not revenge. This.
The beach house in Jeju was quiet in the mornings. Amara sat on the deck with her coffee, watching the waves roll in while Min Jae helped their son build what was supposed to be a sandcastle but looked more like a crater. Chukwamika, Mecca to his father, who had indeed mastered the pronunciation, was 4 years old with his mother's expressive eyes and his father's stubborn jaw. He commanded the beach project with the authority of a tiny emperor.
More sand, Appa. Bigger.
Yes, Commander. Min Jae's voice was solemn, but his eyes sparkled with barely contained laughter. Amara smiled into her coffee. This was her life now. This improbable, impossible life that she had never dared to imagine during those dark years of running and hiding. A husband who would still destroy worlds for her, but who was equally willing to destroy his dignity playing in sand with his son. A career that fulfilled her. She was head of trauma surgery at Seoul National now, on her own merit. A family that spanned 2 continents and 3 cultures, woven together by love that had survived the worst the world could throw at it. Min Jae looked up and caught her watching them. His expression softened into something private. Something that was just for her.
Join us, he called.
The commander needs more subjects for his kingdom. I'm supervising from a strategic distance. The queen does not supervise. He stood, brushing sand from his knees. The queen participates. He crossed to the deck, extended his hand. And Amara, as she always did, as she always would, took it. Later, after Mecca was asleep and the house was quiet, they stood on the deck watching the moon rise over the water.
Any regrets?
Min Jae asked quietly. Amara considered the question seriously.
1, she admitted. He tensed.
I regret that we lost those 7 years. She turned to face him, her hand rising to cup his cheek. I regret all the mornings I could have woken up beside you. All the meals we could have shared. All the moments we could have had.
His expression eased. But
if we hadn't lost them. She traced the tattoo at his throat, still there, still beautiful, now joined by new ink that included their son's name. Maybe we wouldn't appreciate this as much. Maybe we needed to lose each other to understand what we had. That's very philosophical. I'm a very philosophical person. You're a very beautiful person. He kissed her, slow and sweet and full of promise. And I intend to spend the next 7 years, the next 70, making up for the ones we lost. The waves rolled in. The moon rose higher. And on that beach in Jeju, surrounded by the evidence of a life neither of them had dared to hope for, Kang Min Jae and Amara Seonwosu Kang held each other and let themselves believe in forever. Because love that survives betrayal is stronger than love that never faces it. Because people who choose each other after learning the worst are bound tighter than those who never had to choose. And because some stories, the ones written in blood and tears and impossible second chances, deserve endings that make all the pain worthwhile. Thank you for watching. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe for more cinematic romance content. Drop a comment below and let me know, would you have trusted Min Jae with your heart? Would you have chosen to stay?
Until next time.